My artwork focuses on me and my family's immigrant story. Most of my work is autobiographical and is a way for me to look back into the past of our story and into the future. Much of my work is collage-based and installation-based. While looking through my pieces, you will see imagery that is both cultural and it has photos, stories, familial elements. You can see drawings of my parents, my grandparents, cousins, aunts, my sister. For me, this is a way to connect with the past, and it's also a way for me to connect with Mexico, a place where I no longer live. Creating my artwork is also a way for me to understand and discover elements of my family's story that are not as simple or that are hard for me to understand specific choices in our life. Most of my work focuses on memory and storytelling. And so when I go back and reflect on these themes, I like to form a response to them that comes into fruition through drawing, collage-based practices, audio, video, performance, and many other types of mediums. Ultimately, I like to work with installation-based work because I feel like I can tell a larger story through it. And I truly believe in the aspect of scale and having bigger artworks and images make a big statement as well as connect with the viewer. For me, it's very important to be able to share my story as a Latina in the United States, as an artist, and as an immigrant. I feel like my story can be part of other collective stories, sharing many similarities, but also being its unique own story that is directly related to each and every person in my family and every component that has made my life the life that it is today. Although my work tends to share similar narratives and themes as other immigrant stories, I feel like it's important to share each story, each individual aspect, to form a bigger tapestry of the Latinx immigrant narrative in the United States. In my art practice, I love working with collage and drawing. Collage is very special. I feel like it directly translates the aspect of memory being fragmented. Every memory that we have as humans comes from a specific place. But as we get older and as we change into different people, as we visit different contexts, these memories shift and change and absorb other things around us. So for me, being able to find a material that can shape and visually encompass these themes of change, I immediately gravitate towards collage. You can manipulate collage in many ways. I especially like the aspect of paper and paper holding memory, just like our mind and heart does. For me, the act of manipulating paper is also a physical way to find closure with certain elements in your life. I also use vellum. For me, vellum is very special. This material already has its own signature haziness to it. And for me, this adds onto the theme of memory being fragmented, memory being fuzzy, and memory being far away, but also close at the same time. So I like to add vellum onto specific memories. This can be memories that are fuzzy. These can be people that have passed away. These can be text that I want to pull the audience and visitor into a little bit further. There's many ways to add vellum onto the work that I do, and I think it really adds that extra veil that I feel emotionally within my own story. Along with this, I also like to do engrudo sculpture pieces or paper mache pieces. These sculptural elements are in direct connection to my family's home in Mexico City. My grandpa's garden had many beautiful flowers, cacti, plants, fruit, trees. And so every morning I would wake up and see the greenery, would smell the smells, hear the sounds. There's a very physical aspect of memory sometimes, and so for me it's very important to be able to translate this through a physical act. These flowers are a way for me to feel close to home, but also a way to show that memory, depending on the time, can stand still. Because I was younger, the last time I saw these pieces have a little bit of a playfulness to them. They're bright and they're not as factual as plants are. So for me, it's important to be able to imitate this aspect. Family figures are very important in my work. As you look through my images, you'll be able to see people from my life specifically. A lot of times I will draw them in a specific manner that relates to a specific memory. Over them, I'll layer other bits of information that I think can build a higher story and a higher narrative that can connect them from the past to me now in the present. These familial stories, photographs, movies, and memories are always a way for me to convey the emotional limbo of my immigrant story. My work always deals with fragments. These fragments can be something that alludes to the past or that directly timestamps the present. When I focus on figures in my family, I like to create an homage to them through the work that I do. I like to think of them, who they were back in the past, and who they were in the country that they lived in. I also like to connect other things that they might have liked or things that immediately remind me of them. For example, when my parents were young, in their early dating days, I look at photos and letters that they wrote to each other. For me, it's very significant that they were completely different people than they are now. There are signs of trauma, aging, sadness, loss, but also growth, both emotional and physical, and of learning how bigger the world is and how life extends and shapes. When I look at these moments from my parents, there's a little facet of voyeurism. I feel like I'm intruding on a very valuable and naive moment to almost two people who I can hardly recognize. There's a very loving facet to their conversations. And so when I create works about them, I really like to focus on who they were at that time. And I see my pieces that I make from these bits of information that I gather as an homage to who they were at that specific moment. My parents loved listening to romantic music. They loved going on walks. They loved looking at plants and spending time together. So a lot of times when you see images of my parents, you will see flowers around them as a way to directly connect them to the home they lived in. You will see text from some of their favorite songs. And I will also borrow some letters that I have been able to keep and faxed and collage them over their faces or around the environment that I put them in. I'm very lucky to come from a family of documenters and archivists. My mom, my dad, my grandparents keep everything. And so when I'm doing research for each of my pieces, I always look back on archives that they have kept of our family. It's pretty easy to build a specific timeline from when my parents began dating to when we moved to the United States. I really like to spend time with letters that were written between my parents. There's a very specific facet that is almost poetic to each single letter. Back then, they were faxing letters back and forth between Mexico and the United States. And so you can see these timestamps, and you can see even specific areas that have been slightly damaged by moisture, the folding of the letters. I really like to treat these letters as something that is part of the research that I do into the work that I make. When I spend time with these letters, I get a whole new facet of who my parents were and the choices that they made. It's a way for me to understand decisions in a family dynamic. At the same time, I feel lucky that I can get to know another facet of them, the individual people that they were before they met each other, the individual people that they were when they met each other, and then their own identity before they were parents. They were students, they had aspirations, and they had hopes. And so when I look through this work, through these pieces, this all informs the work and the artwork that I continue to make. Besides letters, we have family videos. And culturally, we're very lucky to be able to practice storytelling. A lot of stories that have been told from each generation, from my grandparents, my great-grandparents, to me. As well as this, I deal with technology, a way to connect with my family in Mexico, even though I'm no longer there. I use social platforms like WhatsApp, sometimes Facebook, and even through text. I ask my aunts to send me pictures and videos of what the home that I used to live in looks like now. And I also ask them to send pictures that I may have not had seen in a long time. Once again, this is a way for me to work towards the fragmented facet of memory and to fill in those gaps through my artwork. When working with memory, I tend to wonder how factual memory is. This has been a question in all of my artwork since before I was an undergrad. But when I was an undergrad, I focused heavily on working towards the immigrant story and finding out more information about how memory comes into play. Oftentimes, memory will be tied to trauma or will be hidden because of trauma. And so for me, it's important to look back on every little detail and form a better narrative. At the same time, I believe that this is cathartic, not only for me, but for my family. A lot of times I'll get asked by friends or people who see my artwork how my family feels about me making my art about them. I come from a supportive family, but I do believe that a lot of the work that I have done has helped me and my family have a better family dynamic, better communication. And a lot of my artwork, I believe, has said many things that are hard to say through words. I like to think of titles in my work as an extension of the piece as well. Titles give extra information, or they can hide extra information. But for me, in my titles, I like to write small bits that I think directly send a message to my parents or to the viewer. Color is also very important in my work. Color immediately is a foil of my memories in Mexico. Mexico City, where I grew up in specifically, has no rules with color. When you walk, you will see all colors clashing. You'll see juxtaposition between things you don't expect. And there are truly no rules to how you can create your home, your streets. There's always something to see and always something to take in. Although, in comparison to many of the houses that I lived here, or I have lived here, the color palette of Mexico is a little chaotic. I like to find some peace in these aspects. For me, it's a way to connect directly with the memory. But oftentimes, color is the most vibrant thing that stands out in a memory to me. I also like to use color through plants, since plants were very dominant in my upbringing. Plants represent my great-grandpa's garden, and then kept by my grandpa. We had cacti, birds of paradise, fig trees, mango trees, palm plants, all types of plants. It was green, it was lush, and it was colorful. So for me, when I'm making work, I like to put them in as the background. Sometimes because it's a background memory, and sometimes I put them in the foreground, since they're a way to ground myself to that specific place that I'm no longer in. Color also brings out specific elements in a memory, such as a brightly colored cake, my quinceañera dress, my mom's purse, and the color of our family home. Color is something that will always be prominent in my work. At the same time, I have done a lot of pieces that work with graphite. I like to look for the balance between black and white and color as well. I think this foils as well into the aspect of memory and how sometimes when you're thinking or trying to recall or remember, some parts are brighter than others and some are more concrete. And overall, all these connections form a dreamscape. What inspires my artwork and my art practice is that I know that the more I work towards unearthing my own family story, the closer I get to building a more factual representation of our immigrant story and our family dynamic, while at the same time I'm representing other elements that people, visitors who view my work may connect to. I think it's important to have conversations about where we come from as well as where we go to. It's important to have conversations about our families, our history, and our family dynamics specifically. When we look into our family story, we're also reflecting towards us our own identity, why we are the way we are, why the practices that we have are there, and all the understanding underneath it. When doing this work, you're often presented with trauma, with questions of why, but at the same time, you're being presented with options to heal and to fix or build a better lifestyle for yourself, for your community, and for the people that are connected to you. And so for me, I like to find inspiration in knowing that I have the choice to recollect and rediscover my identity through my family story. At the same time, I'm preserving and archiving. Specifically, if you think about museum studies, it's important to archive every little bit of information that we have as a society. So to me, it makes sense that we would begin with the people that we live with and the people that we came from, where we were born, and every footprint that we have left through our own personal story. This is a way to reconstruct our communities, make them stronger, and to learn from them. For me, my creative practice starts at home and often looks in the past, but it's in a consistent limbo between the past, the present, and the future, while at the same time I'm having internal conversations with myself and reflections with my family. I like to think that I'm also, and I aim to think that I'm also having those conversations with the public. For me, a big win is when I have my work installed at a show, or someone comes up to me and they tell me, I saw your work. It connected with my mom. My dad connected with it. I connected with it. It reminded me of this. A specific memory that I have was from an exhibit I had at a flat file at Art Space. A good friend of mine who I had known for a couple of years sat down one time and talked to me about how important my work was to his parents. Although my goal wasn't to make someone cry, the message that he was delivering to me was that his mom had related to it on a lot of levels, and that for her it was important to have those conversations with her children as well. I like to think that this is that facet that, although I don't get exposed to as often, people walk away with a message, or people can walk away with something that they feel like they're a part of. To me, it's important to be that fiber of our community. And so, although my work is individual and it has its own unique facet, it's part of the larger fiber of the Latinx and the immigrant experience, as well as what it's like to live in the United States, and specifically in Kansas City.